A year ago, on January 20th, 2025, Donald Trump placed his hand on the Bible to become the 47th President of the United States. The world's media was camped out, ready to analyze every word of his inaugural address. But what if I told you that speech was the least important part of the day? What if the real story wasn't the carefully crafted rhetoric from a teleprompter, but a silent institutional drama that played out in the background? A drama that would come to define the past year far more than any presidential address. On that day, the world was hanging on every word of Donald Trump's inauguration speech. But the words he said were far less important than the system he was about to confront. While the media focused on the rhetoric, the real story was about the entrenched powers, the permanent bureaucracy, and the global order that would either bend to his will or break his presidency. This isn't just about one man or one speech. This is about a fundamental conflict over the nature of American power itself. And if you knew where to look on that day, you saw the opening moves in a war for the future of the United States. This is the only thing you needed to watch to understand the real battle for America. Every 4 years, the inauguration is a masterclass in political theater, designed to project stability and tradition. This time, however, the symbolism was rewritten by circumstance. Due to freezing temperatures and high winds, the grand spectacle on the west front of the Capitol was abandoned. And when the next crisis hits, don't say nobody told me, because I told you. See you next time. Instead, the swearing-in ceremony was held indoors, in the Capitol Rotunda, with attendance limited to only about 600 people. The Grand Parade down Pennsylvania Avenue was also moved, its public grandeur traded for the enclosed space of the Capital One Arena. It was a fitting metaphor. A populist force, known for its sprawling outdoor rallies, was physically contained by nature and logistics. The institution, quite literally, forced the ceremony into its own house. But this goes deeper than logistics. The focus on an inaugural address misses the point. A president's speech is a statement of intent, not a magic spell that becomes law. A president can promise to drain the swamp, but the swamp is vast, deep, and has its own immune system. The power of the presidency is immense, but not absolute. It's filtered through and often resisted by a sprawling government staffed by millions of career employees who were there long before this president and will be there long after. This is the permanent government, the administrative state, or, as it's more controversially known, the deep state. During his first term, Donald Trump frequently clashed with this apparatus. He railed against leaks, politically motivated investigations, and intelligence agencies. Reports from inside his administration detailed how career staff would sometimes slow walk or obstruct directives they disagreed with. This isn't new. Every president faces institutional inertia. But the Trump presidency brought this conflict into the open. He didn't just disagree with the bureaucracy, he declared war on it. And as he returned to office, he came with a planner, detailed radical blueprint to dismantle the very system he believes tried to thwart him. To understand the battle that began a year ago, you have to understand the battlefield. What is this so-called deep state? The term conjures images of a shadowy cabal, but the reality is more complex. We're really talking about the administrative state, the massive network of federal agencies and the millions of non-elected career civil servants who staff them. These are the specialists and everyday workers who keep the government running, no matter who wins an election. They process social security checks, ensure food safety, and collect intelligence. This system wasn't born in the shadows. It was created by design. Before the 1880s, the government ran on the spoils system, where every new administration would fire the old staff and hire their own supporters. It was inefficient and corrupt. The Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act of 1883 changed that. It created a professional class of government employees hired based on merit, not political loyalty, with job protections to insulate them from partisan whims. The goal was a stable, non-partisan government. Over the next century, this administrative state grew exponentially, especially during the New Deal and the post-WWI expansion that created agencies like the CIA. The idea, championed by early progressives, was that complex problems required expert solutions, free from short-sighted politics. But that insulation is a double-edged sword. The protections that ensure continuity can also lead to a culture of unaccountability. Agencies can develop their own interests, and resist change from a president they see as just a temporary occupant. This is the conflict. The administrative state sees itself as the guardian of stability. A disruptive president sees it as an obstacle, deep state, undermining the will of the people. President Trump's first-term relationship with the intelligence community was a prime example, marked by a fundamental breakdown of trust. This time, he didn't just plan to fight them. He planned to conquer them. This brings us to the most critical document for understanding the last year and the next three, Project 2025. It wasn't mentioned in the inaugural address, but its principles have animated the administration's actions since day one. Organized by the Heritage Foundation and backed by over 100 conservative organizations, Project 2025 is a nearly 10-page playbook for taking control of the federal government. Its stated goal is the dismantling of the administrative state. This is a detailed operational plan for a top-to-bottom takeover of the U.S. government. At its heart is Schedule F. This is an executive order Trump first issued in late 2020 and was expected to be reinstated on day one. Schedule F reclassifies tens of thousands of career federal employees, potentially up to 50. Zero involved in policy making. This reclassification strips them of their employment protections, making them at-will employees who can be fired for any reason. The goal is to purge the government of employees deemed disloyal and replace them with vetted loyalists for whom the project has been building a personal database. This goes far beyond typical political appointments. It's an attempt to remake the civil service into a political tool. The ambition of Project 2025 is breathtaking. The blueprint calls for taking partisan control of the Department of Justice and the FBI, eliminating some agencies like the Department of Education and the Department of Commerce, and dismantling others like the Department of Homeland Security. It advocates for ending diversity initiatives and rolling back environmental regulations. This plan is based on an expansive interpretation of presidential authority known as the unitary executive theory, which holds that the president has absolute control over the entire executive branch. Independent agencies are seen as an unconstitutional affront to that power. This is a declaration of war on the idea of a non-partisan civil service, seeking to resolve the tension by ending the bureaucracy's independence. The inaugural speech was flowery prose. Project 2025 is the cold, hard instruction manual. So, as the cameras focused on the podium that day, where should your attention have been? The real action was in the margins. Here are the three events you should have watched. Because the ceremony was moved indoors, the guest list was cut to about 600, making every person in that room significant. You could see members of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies like Senators Amy Klobuchar and Chuck Schumer, and Speaker Mike Johnson, the very leaders of the legislative branch Trump would need to work with or fight. The body language was telling. Chief Justice John Roberts administered the oath to the president, and Justice Brett Kavanaugh swore in Vice President J.D. Vance. The judiciary would be the ultimate referee in the coming constitutional battles over executive power. The brief interactions between Trump and these figures from the other branches of government were the first raw look at the relationships that would define the next 4 years. After the luncheon, the new president and vice president proceeded to the east front of the Capitol for a time-honored military tradition, the pass-in review. This wasn't just pageantry. It was the formal moment where the military establishment presents itself to its new commander-in-chief. This ceremony is a visual representation of the military's acceptance of civilian control, a test of the relationship between a president often critical of military leadership and the institution he now commands. Holding the inaugural parade inside an arena was unprecedented for weather reasons and fundamentally changed its character. A parade is typically a public affirmation, but this became a more controlled, curated event. The key was who was featured and who was in the audience. The composition of the crowd, whether it felt like a national celebration or a victory rally for one political movement, was a signal of whether the system was being included or pointedly excluded. These three events offered more insight into the reality of this presidential term than the soaring rhetoric of the speech. They were the first visible manifestations of the collusion between the Trump agenda and the institutions of power. The inauguration was just the opening ceremony. The real conflict has unfolded over the past year across three critical fronts. This was the most immediate battle. The administration's moves to implement Schedule F principles were met, as expected, with a storm of lawsuits from federal employee unions, arguing it was an illegal gutting of the civil service. The past year has seen a surge in leaks from within agencies as career staff resisted new political leadership. Bureaucratic slowdowns and refusals to carry out orders deemed unethical or illegal have become common. The administration sees this as draining the swamp. The bureaucracy and its defenders see it as a hostile takeover threatening the rule of law. Nearly every major action outlined in Project 2025 that has been attempted has been challenged in court. Efforts to dismantle agencies, impound funds, and use the Department of Justice for political ends have all landed before federal judges and, in some cases, are heading towards the Supreme Court. Trump has appointed a significant number of conservative judges, but the judiciary is its own institution. The past year has been a battle testing the limits of executive authority against constitutional checks and balances, with the administration arguing for the unitary executive and opponents arguing for the rule of law. The American administrative state is deeply intertwined with the global system of alliances and treaties. Trump's America First approach has put him at odds with this global order, and his second term has been even more disruptive than the first. The permanent national security and foreign policy establishment at the State Department, the Pentagon, and intelligence agencies is deeply invested in this international system. As the administration has moved to challenge long-standing alliances, it has faced immense pushback, not just from foreign leaders, but from within its own government, in a battle between a nationalist agenda and the entrenched forces of globalism. A year ago, Donald Trump delivered his second inaugural address. The speech was bold, defiant, and full of promises. The media spent days analyzing its words. But the speech was a script for a play. The real drama was unscripted. It was in the quiet transfer of military authority, the tense smiles in the Capitol Rotunda, and in a 900-page document called Project 2025 that laid out a plan to deconstruct the modern American government. What we have been witnessing is not just another presidency, it is a fundamental stress test of the entire American system. It pits the raw power of a populist mandate against the deep, inertial power of established institutions. The speech was over in 30 minutes, but the battle it heralded has defined the last year and will define the nation for years to come. The real question was never what Donald Trump wanted to do, but what the deep, entrenched, and powerful systems of American government would let him do. That is the only story that has mattered. If you want to continue following this story, to understand the bureaucratic battles, the court cases, and the institutional conflicts that will truly shape America's future, then subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. We'll be tracking the real war, not just the political theater.